Veritas Files here. Um, just a few more things I wanted to touch on. This will probably take more than one video. It has to do with the kind of the pride and the arrogance, the human characteristic of being very self-satisfied, of thinking that we know something is true when we haven't really reflected on it at all, and parroting other things that we've heard as our own ideas, as if, there's some kind of profound truth. And specifically, I'm thinking of the people that claim, that voting for a Republican or a Democrat is essentially voting for the same thing. And they just use it as a broad brush. They dismiss every person of either party on that basis, whether they're right or wrong. They don't know. They just dismiss them anyway. It doesn't matter. They could do one thing that they disagree with, and therefore, boom. Well, you're just the same as everybody else, and that's just true of all of them. And they might make one exception. They'll say, well, yeah, Ron Paul, he's the one exception out of the 535 members, or out of all politicians that exist on the earth. He's the one exception. Well, that's not enough to say that I'm wrong. Okay, whatever. This is not true. Let me just put it that way. It's just not true. If you want to tell me that, Tom Coburn is exactly the same as Dennis Kucinich or Barack Obama or any other politician we have in office, that's fine. If you want to say that Mike Pence is the same as Barbara Boxer or Dianne Feinstein or Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid, that's fine. It doesn't happen to be true, but they still say it. And it drives me crazy. I mean, if we're going to talk about the real problem and why people say this, I mean, to some degree, I'm sympathetic. I mean, there are a lot of politicians in the mushy middle who do vote essentially the same. We call them rhinos. Some people call them dinos. They're not really for their own party platform. They've ran as a Republican or a Democrat in order to get elected, but they vote with the other party. I mean, Olympia Snowe, Susan Collins, I mean, these kinds of people, I mean, obviously, yeah. I would say there's really no difference between them and most Democrats, right? But this is not true across the board, and it's inappropriate for us to broad brush them as if it is. In addition, this problem arises from the people, and it never ceases to amaze me how often we try to thrust the guilt, the blame for what's going on in this nation onto everyone else but ourselves. If we want change, the appropriate thing to do is not to look to Barack Obama. The appropriate thing to do is look to ourselves. We have to start doing the right thing collectively. And so long as that's not the case, there is no hope for change. And however many times you want to claim that voting for one person is the same as voting for the other, that's not going to change the situation either. Not only is it false, but it accomplishes nothing. It discourages people from voting, and not voting is the same thing as voting for the worst possible choice. Voting a third party in the general election is the same thing as voting for the worst possible choice. I've said it time and again, and it never changes. It's still true. So long as we have any reason to believe that our votes actually count, we should be voting. In the primary, you should be voting your conscience. That's the time to vote for a third party. That's the time to vote for a guy that we think cannot win ultimately. That's the time. In a general election, yeah, I'm going to say it. You have to vote for the lesser of two evils. Now everybody's going to cry and say, oh, I won't do that. I'd rather not vote at all, right? But it's true. If my choice was an average American or Adolf Hitler, I'm going to vote for the average American. Sorry, there's a difference. I got to vote for that person. Now, are they both going to do wrong things? Absolutely. But somebody's going to do fewer wrong things than the other. And if you need to, you can look at it from a slightly different perspective. It still means the same thing, but you can look at it this way. You can vote for the person who will do the least moral harm and the most moral good. Okay? Look at it that way. in most cases, it's possible to identify the difference. Even though, for example, voting for John McCain would still send us ultimately into economic collapse, it would probably have happened slower. Now, maybe that's not good enough, but quite frankly, if I can add 2 days to the time it takes for us to go into economic collapse, I'm going to do so. It gives me more time to prepare. It doesn't change ultimately the direction that we're going to go, but I'm of the mind that that's probably impossible by now. We are so degraded in our natures, in our consciences, and in our knowledge that I don't believe it's possible to rebuild what we had. I really don't. I mean, just listen to what good people that we like, people that are friends, say on YouTube. I was listening to Demcat the other day, and he was comparing this whole thing about, voting for one party or another, to asking somebody if, voting for the lesser of two evils, asking somebody, what hole they wanted to be raped in. This is just ridiculous. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous thinking, but that's what goes on. That's what passes for serious thought and reflection on the issues, and it's silly. The truth is, to the extent that people actually have differing beliefs and adhere to their party platforms, there are massive differences. To the extent that they don't, that's our fault. We voted these morons into office. And I will say, in addition, if you are not a conservative both fiscally and socially, you're not a conservative really. The same thing for the liberal. If you're not a liberal both socially and fiscally, you're not really a liberal. And why do I say that? If you care about social issues, but you are fiscally liberal, i.e. George Bush, you are going to end up dealing with the social fallout of your liberal policies and attacking the very thing you say you're for. You're socially conservative, but you're going to be attacking social values and dealing with the consequences, the fallout from the degradation of social values simply by spending money in the way that you do. If you incentivize people to be lazy, you incentivize people to not have jobs, you incentivize people to look at children as meal tickets versus as valuable human beings, you're going to breed dysfunction into the American family. It's just as simple as that. And the more you do that, the more social consequences will follow, the more money you'll have to spend, so forth and so on. If you don't care about social issues, and you don't do anything to maintain even a basic public morality, you're going to be spending money like you never thought you would. Your fiscal conservatism is going to go straight out the window, as you have to deal with the consequences of people looking at their preborn children as nothing more than blobs and refusing to protect their right to life. As you destroy the family, or see the family destroyed, by undefining the institution of marriage, by disconnecting it from childbirth, even thematically, and by saying that any grouping or coupling constitutes a family. You're going to remove the reason for people to get married in the first place. They're not going to think that you need to be married in order to have a family, because everyone has a family, whether married or not. In any case, these kinds of things need to be reflected upon. They need to be talked about intelligently, and I never see that, or rarely see that. I don't want to say never, because somebody has talked about it, I know. But it's not common. And I just wish that we would take things a little more seriously. Stop focusing on blaming the symptoms, and let's blame the cause, right? The American people. The politicians are a reflection of us. The system is a reflection or development of our voting. And it's been going on for a long time, so it's not each individual's fault entirely. But let's put the blame where it should be, And instead of looking to Barack Obama for change, let's look to ourselves to change the situation. Let's start doing the right things. Thanks, people. Appreciate it. Feel free to comment.